utilize that to make the changes much more impactful. I don't think that's an unreasonable request, and I think it would go a long ways towards making the game feel better. Because then each talent, choosing a talent really kind of changes at least just the general appearance. And I know the devs know that appearance matters because they've put so much into the transmog system. You know, and I've heard a couple people make the comment that, you know, playing the game specifically for transmogs is a very viable end game method. That's your way of playing the end game. And that is how some people do it. They go back and they run old dungeons over and over again, and run old raids over and over again, and collect different pieces of gear for the appearance. And, you know, it may seem silly to a lot of people. I'm one of them. I don't get the whole transmog thing. I like having limited choices because I feel like it forces you to kind of make decisions on as you go, rather than just having, you know, every piece of every appearance and then you just keep going and, you know, reapplying it to what you have. But it's a viable method of playing the game, and it's a method that a lot of people engage in, even if it's a secondary thing they do. You know, it's something you do and you've got nothing else to do, but it still shows that appearance within the game is very important because it's about that personal identity. And again, I think this is what the old talent trees also reinforced was, I do my talents like this. It's a little off the norm, but it's how I do it. This is my personal identity within my class because, you know, there's only, 9 classes now? 9 classes, few million players, there's going to be a lot of overlap. So 9 classes, 3 specs-ish. So 27, 28 different ways to play the game. So yeah, a lot of overlap. There's going to be a lot of people doing the same thing that you are in that sense. So having the ability to have these, you know, major changes that really impact your outward appearance to the world, I think is important. I think that was one of the things that, you know, why it was one of the biggest criticisms of Legion is that we all have the same fucking weapon. You know, it doesn't feel fun when all of us have again, Ashbringer gets used the most because Ashbringer was such an iconic legendary. It was one of those things that you almost didn't want it to be in the game because it was a weapon of legend. It was one of those things that you couldn't attain because it was so badass. Like, with, like, you know, in Wrath of the Lich King, you couldn't get Frostmourne. But what they did was give you that axe, which was kind of, you know, the closest you're going to get. And that was, you know, acceptable. You're like, it's fine, it's cool, I'm about it. Because you almost don't want Frostmourne because of the story and the kind of the, you know, grandeur of the weapon. And I think there was a lot of people like, well, that's cool that we get, you know, Ashbringer. And I think a lot of people who played Ret Paladin on, you know, launch day were probably fucking hyped. But then you get $1 on and realize that all you assholes are running around with Ashbringer, and you're like, oh, that's not fun. I remember to the point where I was transmogging my stuff to look, you know, 100% different and usually much more basic, because at that point I found when everybody's running around with, like, you know, the World Destroyer on their back, this giant, massive, you know, Final Fantasy-esque weapon, it was, you know, having a very simple weapon to kind of compare to, you know, your more kind of very ornate and big gear, I think I liked the way it looked. It gave me, and again, I stood out amongst a lot of people, and I still do it to this day, as, you know, the gear models get more intricate and more well designed. You know, you got these flowing robes and shit hanging off of you, and animations on the helmet and back and shoulders, and, you know, like, I'm just use a simple staff because it actually adds more depth to the character. And I think it's, yeah, this idea that everybody is the same. And I think it's multiplied by the fact that we all feel like we're doing the same thing. So we're all playing the same character, doing the same things, and having the same, you know, talents. And, you know, the only outlet we have for individuality is outward appearance and transmogs. Excuse me. I think, yeah, there's definitely an issue there for kind of personal impact. And again, I think that was, I feel like a broken record. I keep saying the same thing over again. I usually do because it's early and I'm tired. That, yeah, I think having the ability to play your class, even if in a very minor way, the way you want to, that makes you feel like a unique individual in this very large world is important. Because that's the whole idea of an MMO, is that you are one of many. Not you are a copy of many. So how do we change the talent system? So again, I like to try to kind of give maybe not a good solution, but a solution as I see it. Along with, kind of an outline of what the problem is. So how would you fix the talent system and make it make sense? I think the most direct and easy approach would be to go back to the old talent trees. Get rid of the rows, go back to the trees. Better is maybe add in, maybe keep the rows, from a design point of view, but then put trees in between the rows. So the rows act as kind of the keystone elements, where at 15, 30, these kind of big milestone levels, you still have the rows and you choose from 1, 2, or 3, and 1, 2, or 3 stays impactful, but then add in, tree elements in between the rows. Ideally, you really want, because again, I'm a fanboy a bit, is go for a talent web system. I think, I won't use Path of Exile this time because I always use that, but Final Fantasy X, I think, did a really good job of giving you this kind of really broad landscape to move through in order to level up and choose new abilities and upgrade stats. Now, obviously, it wouldn't be exactly the same because it's a completely different game. But I think a very branching web system is, again, because there's a lot of interpretation. Now, a lot of people are going to go for the same keystone, and again, you would design it so, there's kind of a point A and a point B in a general sense, but then it's how you manage to get to from point A to point B that really defines your character. And I think is WoW ready for a talent web? They kind of did it with the Legion artifacts. Again, the only real issue was that you were eventually going to unlock everything, so it didn't. It felt unnecessary. The choice wasn't actually there because you're going to get there eventually. So it was a good idea implemented very badly. And you kind of get the impression that the way they did the Legion artifact weapons was they built the classes at full power and then pulled shit out and stuck it inside the weapons for effect. That was really kind of the impression that I got, and I think that was what made it feel so kind of bland, is because while getting the big keystones in the weapons felt impactful, you really kind of got the impression that the game was being balanced around having all these keystones, having everything unlocked. So it just kind of again, you had to get them all and you're going to get them all, so it didn't really give you the freedom of choice. I think the same method where you have a start point and then maybe a circular path with a limited number of points to hand out, that could work. Because do you go left, do you go right? Do you take the cut across when you get halfway through the left path to go pick up the right path? Do you work your way to the end stone, or do you take all the little ones in between? I think that could really be a good idea. I think a talent web system could work. Again, it ain't broke, don't fix it. Go back to the straight talent trees and make that the way too. That could also work. I think ostensibly they end up being kind of the same thing. I think with the one big difference is that you have more concurrent, impactful talents at the same relative point on a web, because it's unilateral. You're either going to go left or right. You kind of have to pick a direction. So the end points, the end keystones aren't as impactful, and there's still a lot of really strong stuff, in between, because you're limited to how much that you can take based off of which path you choose. Where a talent tree, you're just going straight down. So it's weak at the top, strong at the bottom. That's kind of always going to be a thing. But that actually is almost better, and it's one of the things that I said I wasn't going to do, but I'm going to do it. Path of Exile is very early on. You can get to one of the big keystones on the outer edges of the talent web. That's because that big keystone is very far. If you go for that one, you can't go for the other one at the same time, so you still have to make that choice. And again, I think it works that way because early on you can pick up something very impactful. But you kind of do it at the sacrifice of something else very impactful. But again, it gives you that choice that I want to play the game this way, not that way. And I think, and so it would make leveling feel more fun with a Talon Web. Because, again, you're being able to get really, if you want to go straight for, and let's use Bladestorm as an example, if you want to try to, count the nodes and say, okay, there's 20 steps between me and Bladestorm, if I go straight there. So I can pick a Bladestorm really early on and have a lot of fun with that. But, again, the idea is that you're going to miss a lot of defensive things, and, again, Path of Exile does this, where you could beeline it straight for the damage-dealing stuff so you can pump your numbers up. But you're going to skip a lot of defensive stuff, things that increase health and, energy shield and other defensive stats. And by skipping all those stats, you're going to end up basically a glass cannon, but that's your choice. And the game's fun because of that, because you get to make that choice. And so maybe you want to beeline it for that, be a glass cannon for a little bit, then backfill with the defensive stuff, and then, become stronger that way. Maybe you want to take all the defensive stuff first so you can kind of level really easily, and then fill in the higher damage dealing stuff. Again, it's totally up to you, and that is what feels nice. So yeah, I think as I'm kind of talking here, I think a Talon Web system would be really ideal if they pulled it off correctly. And again, I think take any number of the Legion artifact trees and just limit the amount of points you get to spend, and then obviously broaden them up a little bit because they were designed for a 10 level stretch, not a 120 level stretch. But yeah, I think that could be really, really good. Something else I think I would really like to see, this is kind of unrelated, but it is, and I think it could be baked into a similar system, was the glyph system. Was a fucking wonderful idea that I don't understand why it never took off. It was such a good idea, and I think the problem is that they just, I guess they got cold feet on how to actually implement it. Because I think giving, each class's core spells choices, such a good idea. And I feel like that could be a lot of how the talent trees work in moving forward. Where, even if they were kind of an aside on the talent tree and function kind of similar to the way the glyph system did, but kind of baked more heavily into the talents. Because I think the idea is, so if you take a very basic mage skill, Frostbolt, does damage, has a slow. That's it. But now give you the option, and I think the issue was with glyphs, it was either they were net gains across the board, and I think that was where they did wrong. Where I think each glyph, so you give 3 glyphs for Frostbolt, and then there should be a plus side and a bad side, and now it's up to you to choose. So does more damage, doesn't have the slow effect. Okay, again, that would be much better for raiding, where you're dealing with targets that you can't slow. Bosses don't get slowed, so maybe you take that. Reduced damage, increased cast speed. So what's that mean? It means you can apply the slow more often. It's better for slowing multiple targets. Probably good for PvP because you can now pop frostbolts out to multiple targets and keep them all slowed for a period of time. Reduced damage, or maybe increased cast time, has a chance to root. So instead of increase the cast time, same damage, applies a slow effect, but there's a chance that it'll freeze them in place for a few seconds. Again, good for probably PvP, a little inconsistent for PvP. Probably good for adds and dungeons, because now when you're hitting big adds with Frostbolt, there's a chance that they'll get locked into place. So if it's something that has to be cut, again, this is kind of, you don't see this kind of gameplay that much in dungeons anymore, which is an issue in and of itself. But still, and this is just, I'm spitballing these as I go. So not everything needs a glyph, but I think every major, or a glyph, or I don't know, like a talent aside, basically, something, that allows you to modify the spells as you go. I think that could be a really good, neat system. And maybe that's even something you unlock. The talent tree, one of the paths you could go down would be to get, a modification to one of your core spells. So you could either take just a flat damage increase, one of the nodes might be, a keystone that gives you either a brand new spell or a big interaction to an existing spell, or just a flat big increase. Or one of the options you could go for would be these little, kind of the way the Azurite gear looks and works, would be these little dials. So it's got the core spell in the middle, and then you can select one of 3 options around it to modify the spell in a very dramatic way. And I think a lot of the current way, I think, Warriors tier 1 talents, it's either charge, your charge ability has 2 charges, charge ability has, deals a stun, or charge ability does something else. So they've kind of already touched on this, where you can take a core ability that you use all the time and make one of 3 choices about how to modify it. Again, I think one of the issues is that when it's just a net gain, there's going to be a clear-cut winner, because this one improves it the best. But if you have a gain and a loss, it makes you feel, it makes you be a little more critical about it. But it also then, your gear in your own personal character affected. So kind of going back to my, real rough example for Frostbolts, one of the options was a longer cast time for a better effect. Early on, that's going to look like garbage, but once you've stacked a bunch of haste, all of a sudden, now that's looking pretty nice, because now that long cast time isn't as impactful. So it's one of those things that would change as you change, and it would become a little bit more usable as you become stronger. And again, that's a good thing, because anytime things that make you revisit things in the game, I think are good, because that increases depth and it increases, interaction. Or now talents are, I think talents are designed to be changed very quickly, and that's one of the big pros that a lot of people push, is that now the current talent system is, I can change my talents very quickly, very easily, based on the necessity in the situation. And that is very true. But I think also that's also because the choices don't matter as much. You're not locked in. You're not dedicated and committed to how you play your class. And again, you can say, well, in Mythic Plus, where you're dealing with 5 small groups, talent changes are inevitably needed, and that's true, because it's you're going to have a single target build, you're going to have a multi-target build, and that's very true. And you could also argue that maybe that is slightly bad game design, to make you kind of choose between one or the other. Because again, it feels like it's a don't bring the class, bring the player, but now it's kind of become bring the spec, not the class. Kind of know what I'm saying. And I think that's kind of an issue with class design in general, where the option they give you, and this is kind of across the board for especially a lot of DPS classes, I think, is your talent choices really revolve around single target, multi-target, or I feel like maybe more survival. I think that's kind of the 3 main choices that a lot of the talents can be broken down into, is either you're harder to kill, you're good at killing one thing, or you're good at killing lots of things. And I think while that is an effective choice system, I think it's just not a very good one. Because then, it makes, again, it basically situationally makes it so you have to change your talents. And maybe that's kind of the idea. Maybe the idea is that you need a situation to change your talents, because now those stupid inscription tones that let you do that on the fly are important and useful. Maybe. I think talent should be something that overall are more concrete, but there's something that you're going to want to revisit as time goes on, because there will be a bit of an interaction with you and your gear. I think that adds an effective depth, where I think being able to constantly change your talents all the time and having to, it gives the illusion of depth, without actually adding any depth to the game. Because when something becomes just 100% expected to happen, you again, it's not something. It doesn't feel impactful. It just feels like a task you're doing at that point. And that's a lot. And that's one of the biggest issues I think the game has, kind of overall, in a very broad, generalizing sense, is that a lot of stuff just feels like a task. And so it's like you're expected to respect your talents in Mythic Plus. You're expected to have a few tones of Tranquil Mind, because on the trash you want to go this, on the boss you want to go that. And it's just expected, it's just what you do. Rather than saying, well, I'm built this way because that's my class and that's how I play. And but also having functional, being functional all around. Yeah, I think it's, and again, you get the real impression that a lot of the talent system is designed for this kind of fluff gameplay where it's like, oh, you have to change your talent, that's the thing you do now. And it's like, I don't want to do that. I want to commit to a play style and then own that play style and be unique in my own person in that play style. Not, keep flipping and flopping between the handful of cookie cutter builds that, are used for, these specific situations that keep coming up. Again, I think a talent web would be a really good change and a push in the right direction. I think a talent system that gives individuality and player choice is a really good system. I think baking into that system the ability to modify core spells, and again, it doesn't have to be every spell. If it's one, maybe it's 3 of your most core spells, if they can be modified, again, maybe not all the time, maybe it's a choice. I think that would be a good system. I think the talent system in general needs to be altered back to having a lot more options. I think it feels very flat and very bland right now, specifically because it's designed to be simple. And again, the reason that we've come to this boils all the way back down to the same